Good evening. Remember me? Welcome to Dave's Tackle Box. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up tonight. A bit of a mixed bag, actually. To be honest with you, I'm not doing that much. But anyway, let's have a chat. Let's run the titles and then we'll have a chat. See you in a minute. And hello again. Right, well, yes, it's been a little while, hasn't it? Hasn't it? If you recall, the reason I took a break from the show was just work and all kinds of stuff going on. And I needed just a little time to try and sort of concentrate on some other things other than VTTV. And the plan was that I'd take a few months off, come back, have everything sorted out. I wanted to revamp the little studio area, which is my office that I broadcast from, and I had all these great plans and designs. And well, if I flick to here, and I think I've got a microphone on this shot, something's registering anyway, you'll notice that I've done absolutely bugger all in this room. I have, however, scored a lot of brownie points with the missus because we've done other areas of the house and stuff like that. But anyway, so we found ourselves, I've been watching VTTV over the last few weeks since we relaunched after the summer break, and feeling really left out. So I thought, right, that's it, I'm going to do my show again. So I forced my way in, and I have to say, and this is as good a time as any to say it, I suppose, all the new presenters, aren't they good? Really, really pleased with that. But I was sitting watching all these newbies there doing shows thinking, well, I should be doing that. So without any sort of idea of how I was going to remodel the show, without having done any of the technical stuff that I was going to do, I've come back anyway. So if this shot looks familiar, now you know why. I still haven't tidied that shelf. To be fair, I have moved a load of the mods. They're off camera shot at the moment, but they're all on the desk, so they move backwards and forwards a bit, but I've sorted nothing out, because that's how I roll. And I grew a beard. But so we're back anyway, and the format of Dave's Tackle Box now, going into the future, we're going to change it slightly. Something that makes use of the new bigger VTTV team we got, and I'm very, very glad to say that in a few moments you'll see the first of a series of little VTs that Mr. Dawn has filmed for me. It's called Driving and Thinking. It sounded more like ranting to me. But we're going to have a look at that. Then we're going to have a more improvised than was originally intended, and it was never going to be scripted, look at the eVic Supreme, and I'll explain why. But if anybody's bought an eVic Supreme, and this noise sounds familiar, and I think you'll hear this. It's not the sound of splintering things, but I'm sure you heard that. And if you're on Windows 8 or the other USB sound you get from Windows 7, you might have some sympathy with me when I start sort of ranting about that in a little while. And towards the end of the show, we've got actually a piece that I was offered again by Dave Dawn. So this is actually the Dave's tackle box tonight. I've got a recorded interview that Dave Dawn did with Linda Bauld at the University of Stirling, and that was a piece that was offered to me, and I could not turn it down, and it is well worth a watch. So we've got a bit of politics, a bit of slagging off software and having a look at a mod, and some ranting. That sounds like the formula for a perfect show to me. And so before we even get to the end, I'm going to say big thanks to Dave Dawn for providing a lot of the content for tonight. So I think probably the best thing to do is get on with it, isn't it? So let's run a sting while I just get myself together, and then I'll be back. Yeah, so I'm a little bit sort of messed up at the moment, but I was looking for my beer and now found it, so that's all good. Right, so Dave has recorded a little series, and we're going to be looking at these over the next few weeks at least, of sort of musings as he's been driving along. The first one, and this is a subject that I think any experienced vaper it irritates a little bit, and the subject is cigarette equivalence. You know, so this is equivalent to 20 cigarettes. This poxy little cigar-like is equivalent to 40 cigarettes. I've had an argument as recently as 3 or 4 weeks ago with a guy in a VIP shop. My partner, she's a very, very occasional smoker, and we were going on holiday. I went to China. I'll show you some pictures later if this eVic thing doesn't work. We were going to China, and she wanted to take an e-cig with her, so I took her into a VIP shop, and she wanted a cigar-like thing, like many of us did. You know, she does not like the idea of this sort of thing at all, and since then I've sorted her out with the e-mini, the e-roll as Joytech called it, and she's quite happy with that. But I bought her a Vipe and some other disposable stuff and everything. And the guy in the VIP shop said to me, "That's equivalent to 20 cigarettes." And I just said, "No, it isn't." And he got really offended and really irritated. "Yes, it is." I said, "It really isn't, honestly." And so I think it's a subject that probably most vapors have thought about at least once. And without further ado, I'll share with you Dave Dawn's thoughts. See you in a bit.
I'm in the mood for ranting, and I am. I'm always in the mood for ranting when I'm driving. Cigarette equivalence. You know, when you go to wherever and buy what looks like a fag, and it tells you this is equal to 20 cigarettes, 40 cigarettes, 60 cigarettes, 80 cigarettes, all of that kind of stuff. Rubbish. Utter, complete drivel. Now, let's get this right. Let's understand this. Over the years, we have discovered that your average 20-a-day smoker, when they switch to e-cigs and they start using a second generation device, even prior to that actually, they will get through somewhere between 2 and 3 millilitres of e-liquid per day at 18 milligram or 24 milligrams, there or thereabouts. So let's call it 2.5 mils, because that's the average of 2 and 3 for a 20-a-day smoker. And it kind of bears out really, because I was a 60-a-day smoker and I get through anywhere between 8 and 10 mils a day. Alright, it's 24 to 36 at the minute. It has been 45, although when I'm using 45 I don't get through quite as much. In other words, I use as much as I need. However, here's the thing. With a cigar-like, and it's usually on a cigar-like that you see these cigarette equivalents, the tanks on them, the amount of juice that's in them, the amount of juice that's actually available to be used, is much less than 1 milliliter, generally speaking. So, to see one of these cartomizers marked up with equivalent to 40 cigarettes is plainly incorrect. In fact, no. Let me be absolutely right about it. It's bullshit. It's not even close. Something that's the same size as a traditional fag and has a cartomizer on it that's roughly the same sort of size as a traditional fag filter tip will have less than a milliliter available to be used. It's going to be around 3/4 of a mil. And even if it's 45 milligram juice that's in there, patently it's not going to be the equivalent of 20 ordinary cigarettes. You're not going to get through a full day on that. It's just not going to happen. And they can do all the puff counts and everything else that they want with their little machine saying a 2-second drag. I'm sorry, it still doesn't cut it. You can't justify it. It is bullshit. Between 2.5 and 3 mils is what your average 20-a-day smoker is going to use. That's there. It's common knowledge. So there is no way on the face of this planet that these cigarette equivalent claims that are made are remotely based in fact. They're not. They're bullshit. Now, my hope is that when the Advertising Standards Authority publishes its guidelines, it outlaws cigarette equivalents. I really want to see that thing taken away altogether because it is so misleading. There are people, many people, and I've spoken to a lot of them, that will go to the corner shop and they'll buy an electronic cigarette, one that looks like a fag, a cigarette, working on the basis that they know that form factor. They can live with that form factor. If they're going to try something, if it looks like a fag, it's going to taste like a fag, it's going to work like a fag. All of those kinds of things play into the decision to have a go. And then they're told, because they see it on the packet, this is the equivalent of 20 of your usual fags. And they find that after a couple of hours of use or 3 hours of use, it's dead, it's had it, or it tastes horrible, or it's burned, or it's just not working anymore, or it's not doing the job. And they get the idea from that, e-cigs are crap. Why? Because the one they tried that promised to be the equivalent of 20 fags wasn't. It was crap. And it's that kind of advertising that I think can bring certain vendors into disrepute. Now, thankfully, the market for cigarettes is shrinking, it's dwindling. There's not many of them being sold in comparison to how many there were. And I think that's a good thing. And I'll tell you for why I think it's a good thing. And that is purely and simply because a Generation 2 device works better. It's more satisfying. It's more likely, in actual fact, to enable people to switch 100% to e-cigs than a looky-likey ever was. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people out there that are using looky-likeys and have completely switched. I know a few, I've met one or two, but they are few and far between. The majority of people that have made the switch, the 700,000 that we know of, that have made the switch are using Generation 2 and better devices. And Generation 2 and better devices are not sold on this is the equivalent of whatever. So there you go. SIG equivalents. Take no notice. It's bullshit. Even puff counts. Take no notice. It's bullshit. Forget it. Don't even look at it. Look at how big the tank is. and then look at how many refills of that tank you need to get through a day. That's the only thing that matters. The rest, it's bullshit.
And that obviously. I did that on purpose. That obviously was Dave Dawn, and that was I think I've got a whole bunch of those, but I'm not going to tell you what's coming up next next week because I haven't decided which one yet. But I've got a few to pick from, and apparently there's going to be more. So that's going to become a bit of a regular feature, and I think in the future, starting next week maybe, I'll be looking for guests to come on air and discuss the things that Dave's been talking about in these little driving rants that he's doing. Now, so if you're brave enough, if you've got a decent broadband connection and Skype and you want to come live on air to discuss one of those, drop me a line at dave.kitson@vaportrails.tv and we'll line you up for a future episode if you're interested, because I'd rather talk to people outside the VTTV team on this. We'll get somebody on air just for 5 or 10 minutes, won't embarrass you, promise. And what I'll do is I'll ping you a copy of the video before we go out live, a couple of days before, so you'll know what we're going to talk about. And that'd be good. So if you're interested in coming along and discussing one, it's dave.kitson@vaportrails.tv. It's really, really easy. But on that subject of e-cig equivalents, like I say, the amount of arguments I've had with e-cig vendors, like little barrows, like e-lights, VIP, all of these places that are opening up everywhere now. And I went to the dentist on Friday morning, and as I walked back from the dentist to my car, which is it's about a 5-minute walk, I passed 3 e-cig shops that weren't there a year ago, and just in my local village, which is a tiny little place. So if you fancy a row, go in and ask them, how many cigarettes is this equivalent to, and they'll tell you 20, 40, 60. And as Dave said, it is bullshit. It just ain't true. But I was watching the comments in chat, and I think pretty much everybody agreed. Is that DK or Wolverine? It's just me. Wolverine doesn't wear glasses, does he? Hasn't he got really good eyesight? So just reading some comments there. The latest vibe is about 1.5 mil. Says puff count depends on how you puff, which I suppose is a fair cop out. But let's face it, we all had that. It wasn't a disposable I bought. It was an E-Lights kit, and each cartridge was supposed to be equivalent to, I can't remember whether it was 20 or 40, but I remember after a week of using my little E-Lights kit that I decided that a carto, far from being 20 cigarettes, I think is what they advertised them as, it was like, I reckon it was about 5 or 6, and the battery was equivalent to about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 as well. So I was finding every time I had to charge the battery, I had to change the carto, So, and I think Dave's absolutely right that it gives e-cigs in general a bad name. But anyway, right, we'll move on. I'm gonna look at the eVic Supreme, which is hiding from camera shot there, and this cable is responsible for the way this is going to go. We'll take our first ad break with all new ads. The audio could be up and down here, so I suggest that you don't turn your volume up too high. I started to, and then I ran out of time. You'll see. Let's watch the ads, if I can find them, and then we'll come back. We'll look at the eVic Supreme and see if it's going to play nicely.
Joytech UK are proud sponsors of vapetrails.tv.
Often imitated, never duplicated. Award-winning service and products from cloud9vaping.co.uk.
Vapers, do you love discovering new e-liquids? Tell Dripper the types of flavours you like and they'll send you 5 gourmet juices each month. Experience new and exclusive flavours, all with a money-back guarantee and free delivery anywhere in Europe. Dripper.co.uk.
RY4 Radio.
And welcome back. Okay, right. That ad in the break there for RY4 Radio has reminded me that Tim Boniface contacted me earlier and said, could I mention that on Friday night on RY4 Radio, he's got Dr. Farsalinos coming on to talk about his latest study and for a chat. So it's Dr. Farsalinos joining Tim in the lock-in on RY4 Radio, ry4radio.com. There you go, Tim. That's another one you owe me. Right, I'm going to talk about the eVic. The eVics. You will recall when this thing, the original eVic, came out. This is the Avali branded version of it. Came out whenever it was, ages ago now. I really quite took to it. There were some things I didn't like about it. There were some things that I didn't think were really necessary with it, like the My Vapor Record software. But I was basically a big fan of the eVic, and the reason was that it brought variable voltage or variable wattage vaping in a mass-produced device. So it was reliable, it worked. I know some people had trouble with theirs, but I've used mine quite heavily, on and off, and it just works. One irritating issue that I did have with it is when you connect it to your PC, it's a bit hit and miss as to whether it would actually be recognised by the computer. So all of those statistics that it collected, if you were really concerned about those, it sometimes was a little bit unreliable. So when I got sent the eVic Supreme, which is this one here, which is basically the eVic 2 as far as I can tell. We'll have a quick look at it. I was very pleased to receive it, and I was very interested to see what they've actually changed. So let's go through the obvious comparisons. First of all, you can see that the eVic Supreme is a darn sight bigger than the eVic. They've made some improvements to it, because I don't think that necessarily is an improvement, to be honest with you. It was big enough to start with. This, with my current device of choice on the top, is a bit of a lightsaber. It has to be said. However, there are some things that have improved. The case, this one was a bit sort of lightweight and flimsy, and it didn't like standing up. This mod has taken so much of abuse just because it's been knocked over on the desk so many times. And this is a little bit more heavy duty. It's got a little bit more weight to it. It's a better quality tube, I would say, than the original eVic. They've done some sort of clever things at the top end. If I take away this little sort of vanity cap here, the 510 thread inside is actually removable. It screws out. And I think that was because a lot of people, because they're a comparatively expensive mod, people were damaging the 510 threads, which weren't particularly well made, apparently. Again, I've had no problems with mine, but I've read enough stories and heard enough complaining about people who've damaged the 510 thread, and then you're kind of screwed. They've made it replaceable on this one. Now, I would demonstrate, but I'm a little bit wary of doing that, and the reason for that is, plain and simply, I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube where people have taken out the 510 adapter, and it never quite tightens back up again, to the extent that when you're unscrewing your atomizer, the thread comes with it. So I'm working on the basis that mine's fine, so I'm going to leave it alone. But I think it's actually quite a good innovation. You can replace the 510 thread. However, if I put this cap back on, which is easier said than done, go on, get back on. In normal use, I never touch the top part there. It just stays like that. One thing worth mentioning, the old one used to taper. This is actually a Cyan Mods replacement one. Because the old one was kind of rounded, do you remember? And then your 22 or any other sort of standard size atomizers or common size atomizers you put on the top just looked a bit daft. So I got this one, which makes it a little bit sort of wider at the top, so it didn't look quite so bad, and it was a bit better made. The other one was kind of metal coloured plastic, whereas this is stainless steel. The quality of this one is a lot better, but they've got this 510 thread in there, and I've seen this is a complaint I've heard from a number of people as well. It doesn't seem to matter what you put on there, you get this big gap. Now with some atomizers that makes for a very airy draw, and it also looks a little bit naff, and mine looks a little bit like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but I'm nitpicking a bit. It's just cosmetic, it works fine. But I thought I'd mention that. The only thing that I found that fits nicely on there is the Joytech Delta tank, which I've also got one of, but I haven't actually used this that much, so I don't really want to go into too much detail about the Delta tank itself. That seems to snug up much better than anything else, so it's kind of like they've almost optimised the height of it to fit this thing, and this thing has a longer or a deeper thread than just about every other atomizer I've got, certainly the ones that I prefer to use. Like I say, it's a bit of a nitpick, but some people get quite sort of anal about gaps. They're putting too fine a point on it, so that's something worth bearing in mind. They've changed the little selector ring here. So before, like, it just turns so far and then springs back in either direction. So once you've set it up to do your variable voltage or wattage, you I can show you. Look, you had to sort of kind of turn it once, and it springs back to let the wattage go down. I'm trying to do this without getting my hand in the way. There we go. So 10.4, 10.3. You could hold it like that, if I remember right. No, you can't. Oh, that's right. Yes, if you turn it and hold it, it cycled through the different modes, didn't it? So you had variable voltage, variable wattage, and then the two sort of special ones they had. So that was a bit of a pain. This one is a little bit better. You also get a picture. There's the Happy Vapor logo on there. You can have a screensaver on this one, and I'll try and show you that in a minute. But I'm not too hopeful, if I'm honest. But this, the whole thing turns around completely this time, and if you turn it round at a certain speed, whoops, he says hitting his beer glass with it. Oh no, that's gone as low as it will. That's why it'll actually sort of go into a mode of automatically cycling through. You may have seen that. There we go. And of course, the biggest difference, which the clued up will already have spotted there, was this one has cycled down to 15 watts, which is 4 watts higher than the old one could manage. And it went up to 30 watts, which is a huge, huge improvement on the 11 watts that this thing could manage. So you can actually use sub-ohm coils on this now. The coil I've got on here at the moment is 0.6 ohms. And the reason I can't go below 15 watts is because it's got a 3 volt lower limit. And I believe it's got a 6 watt upper limit, if I remember rightly. Let's tick it all the way up. But I'm not going to be able to test that because it's, there you go, 4.2 volts, 30 watts. So it's obviously got a much greater range on it. And I have to say, and I'm going to go through this bit before I try and have a look at the software. I have to say that it is an excellent mod. It's a bit bigger than you'd want it to be. It's a bit sort of wobbly and easy to knock over. In fact, I've spent most of this weekend cleaning the garage out, and I left it stood on top of something, and the missus knocked it over with the scrape on top, so my scrape is all scratched. It did fall some distance and hit a concrete floor, and it still worked, which I was quite pleased about. The eVic seems to have survived totally. The scrape's got a couple of more dents in it, but it's basically a much more comprehensive e-cig than the eVic was, and I have to say I like it quite a lot. 30 watts is too much for me, but I'll try it. It just went to sleep on me. Hang on. Detecting. I'll let you see this perhaps. Yeah, it's waking up. Let's try it again. It's cutting out now. Don't know what I've done there. It's too much. Let's make it 25 watts and see what happens. I think I may have damaged something. It's turning itself off. What have I done? Probably crushed the connector or something. There we go, it's working now. And it is actually turning itself off at the moment. It's shutting down. So I guess I'm hitting some amp limit. I've been messing around with it and I've been vaping it at about 19 watts. Seems to work with the coil I've got and the juice I've got in. I quite like it. So as you can see, it works quite nicely. Yeah, so I like it. Now, the software. I'm going to... yeah, I just got a bit of feedback there from Dave Dawn saying the battery may not have the power to drive the coil at that wattage. And I'd say that's probably exactly right. Because it's a crap battery I've got in there. But it's okay because it's regulated and stuff. I want to talk about the software. And I've got a funny feeling that this isn't going to work because I had it all set up. Here we go, look. I had it all set up earlier to try and demonstrate the new software, because instead of the My Vapor Record software that you got with the old eVic, you're now getting something called My Vapors. And it's been absolutely rock solid reliable since I got it until tonight. Specifically, it was working an hour before we came on air, but not half an hour before we came on air. So I'm going to try and connect it with this USB cable, and you should be able to see in the corner there. I'm going to connect it and you'll hear it handshake with Windows 8. Hopefully. Yeah, did you hear that? And it's worked. Right, don't touch the e-cig. Right. I look, I've plugged the cable in and it's worked this time. I was I was rebooting my computer. There was no pre-show tonight because I was rebooting my computer to try and get it to work, and we could not make it work. And I'm getting all my excuses ready early, and then it comes to the bit that matters, and it's worked. Fantastic. So, right, I haven't actually updated this for some time, as you can see. But this is the My Vapors software, which you can download. I got it from the joytech.co.uk website, but I'm sure you can download it from a bunch of places. You could with the old one. First observation I've got is that the old software, it was a bit of a pain. There were beta versions about, and you had to install the original. If you wanted to upgrade, you had to put certain files in certain folders. Which weren't necessarily obvious. And sorry, my screen just cut out. There's obviously some kind of saver going on there. It's just come back up. You had to put certain files in certain folders and find long file paths, and it was a big faff. And for something that most people considered a waste of time in the first place, it was way too much. This new software is a lot more polished. I think if you've seen the original, you've seen this one, it actually looks a bit better. It's a bit more intuitive to use. And the best thing about it is if you go to the bit where it says version, you can actually upgrade, and it will download. It will find the upgrade and do it online and update everything, and everything's fine. So if I just flick through, just spend a couple of minutes flicking through some of the stuff here. You can import the data from the eVic. It's 850 puffs since I last did it. Is that a lot? I don't know. You can see when I'm in Switzerland, look. That's a Monday, where I left at sort of 6 a.m. And that's a Thursday when I get back quite late at night. And you can analyse all kinds of stuff by energy. So I have no idea what that is. Is that, what times? There you go. Let's see what power that I normally vape at. If we go back to the beginning of the month, say. Oh, it doesn't seem to have all of that stuff in there. Average weekly puffs 258. That's interesting. I really needed to know that. Atomizer resistance by puff. You can see I've done everything from 0.5 up to 1.5 because I've been playing with coils for the first time in my life. And yes, I'm really pleased that worked. You can configure stuff. You can change the things like the boot logo. I put the Happy Vapor logo in there, as you saw. It's a little bit involved the way you do it, but it's a bit of fun. You can configure your default amounts. I've got the wrong battery size configured here. I think it uses that to tell you the percentage used and how long you got left. But yeah, it's pretty good. I quite liked it. I quite like it. So I'm really pleased that worked, because I'm shocked that it worked. I haven't left enough time to talk about it because I didn't think it was going to work, and I was just going to slag it off a bit and then get on with something else. But yeah, so the eVic Supreme, I think, is an improvement on the eVic. That 510 and the cap is a bit of a pain. The physical size of it is a bit of a pain, but actually, if you're just using it on your desk or at home, by the side of the bed, wherever, around the house and everything, where that doesn't really matter too much, then it's not a big deal. So I'm finding that I've hardly used anything else whilst I've been at home. That's the truth. Right, I'm going to take another ad break, and I need to move along a bit quickly. I'm going to take another ad break, and when we come back, I'm going to show you an interview with Linda Bauld done by Dave Dawn. I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Right, okay, as I say, we're running out of time. So without further ado, I'm going to play to you now an interview between Dave Dauld, interviewing Linda Bauld of the University of Stirling. This is well worth a listen. Let's get on with it. I'll see you after this.
This week's been a very, very busy week. We've seen the ASA judgment. We've seen all manner of stuff happening, but the latest that happened on Friday is the Scottish Government proposing a consultation more or less about e-cigs, and responses are required. And I'm joined by Professor Linda Bauld, who is Professor of Health Policy and Director of the Institute for Social Marketing at the University of Stirling. Hi Linda, thank you for joining me. I should say for everybody listening that we're recording this as live, but well ahead of the event. So, of this week's happenings, we've got the ASA, we've got the FCA pronouncement for COP6, and we've got the Scottish consultation. Let's start first things first with the ASA guidelines, the advertising guidelines. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that, my position on advertising is that I think we need some advertising and promotion of e-cigarettes because in order to give people information about the products, if they're thinking about stopping smoking, switching, advertising has a role to play there. So I think the ASA decision is helpful in that it's allowing much of the advertising to continue, including on TV. I think there's a couple of things that I'm not a big fan of, which I'd hope they might say something about. The main one, celebrity endorsement. I don't really see there being a very important role for celebrity endorsement in terms of giving information about the products. So, and I think that if you have lots of celebrity endorsement, it opens up to criticism about it being appealing to kids, and we just want to avoid all of that stuff. But, I think the fact that we're still going to have some advertising and promotion is important. What do you think? I
find myself being quite happy about the fact that we're going to be able to see e-cigs being used in adverts, and that's something that's been missing before. I also think that it's going to take away the think of the children aspect, because the guidelines are very, very, very clear that any advert cannot appeal to those that are under 18. Right, and I think from the point of view of those that would oppose, shall we say, that's an argument that's been trotted out so often. These adverts appeal to kids. They can't say that anymore. And that for me is it's a very big thing. I think it's quite important. Do you see the guidelines as saying that as well?
Yes, I do, and I think that's to be welcomed. What I would say, though, that people need to be cautious about is that there's a lot of criticism in the public health community and others of the AHA not having a lot of teeth. And if you look at alcohol advertising, for example, they're not really supposed to promote alcohol to kids or young people. But let's face it, a lot of alcohol advertising is appealing to young people. So there's a fine line, and I think the manufacturers and the companies who are promoting e-cigarettes, I think in addition to the ASA guidelines, they need to prioritize being responsible about content. I think that's a really important message, and I know efforts are being made there, but that's something we've all got to keep in mind.
Well, yes, I would agree. It's I think good, properly targeted, responsible advertising can only help, and I think the guidelines are a great help in that direction. Yeah. Let's move it into the Framework Convention Alliance and what they came out with this week. I mentioned on Thursday that Clive Bates has already had a look at it, but I'd love your take on it too.
Okay, I haven't totally absorbed all the detail, I have to be honest, because I've been really busy this week. But I would say that I know some of the people well who were involved in trying to shape that response. And let's face it, it's come on a long way from what the FCA might have said a year or a couple of years ago. I think it's much more positive and balanced than we might have expected. What was your view on that?
Interestingly, it's about the same as yours.
no, we're becoming too similar.
We can't have
We'll be
this.
able to disagree on something in a moment. So, don't worry. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll find something, Linda. No, I mean, I sat and read through that, and quite honestly, I couldn't really believe what I was hearing. Well, what I was reading, I should say. I was seeing a balance, an actual balance, a real balance that took into account both sides of the argument and debate, and actually framed it as a debate, and a debate that needs a lot more evidence pointing towards it, I think is the phrase I'm going to use. There's a lot more that we can learn, and we need to learn. I've been having conversations with what are regarded as being antis in the States, and they are trotting out some stuff where it does need research. It does need more definitive research, and I think it is true to say that in 2 years' time there'll be a lot more information. I think it's too soon for FCTC to come up with something definitive now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the people who have been very helpful in the FCA response, Deborah Arnott was involved in helping to refine that. Jonathan Folds, who's a professor in the US, you've probably heard of, he was involved. And I think there are others, but if we just use those two as examples, their priority is to get the most recent research considered. And I think that's what we see coming through in the document. You know, we know what some of the really important questions are for the longer term. There's a lot on flavorings, which is not really in that document, where, you know, we've got some research coming out on flavorings. We need more of that. There's more research needed on obviously long-term use, as you know. So I think the document speaks to those things. And we'll see what they make of it. I mean, the difficulty is that the COP negotiation process, there's so many different actors involved in that it's difficult to know what will come out of it.
Yes, that's the bit that gets to me. I mean, I think they're talking about 1,700 people being there.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a lot of viewpoints.
Yeah. And I think, the other interesting thing for me, you know, looking at it in terms of research, is that there are lots of different countries in different positions, right, that have signed up to the FCTC. So the Australian view, as you know, on e-cigarettes is very negative, mostly, particularly Western Australia, where, you know, they're allowed to distribute the vaporizers, but they're not supposed to contain nicotine. Well, even distributing the vaporizers in Western Australia, my understanding is that's now prohibited. Yeah. And then in New Zealand is not quite as far as Australia is, but the regulatory arrangements there are quite restrictive. And then in Canada, of course, you have the position where, again, nicotine-containing e-liquids are ostensibly not legal, although they're available. So all these actors, and then all the other countries which haven't really formed a position on it, but tend to be quite hesitant because they see it as something that's potentially blocking tobacco control measures, they're going to be negative. So I think we will have to wait and see.
I think the bit that gets to me most about the whole thing about the Framework Convention is that the people who are the most affected, are excluded from taking part. Yeah. That bit really sticks in my craw. The old nothing about us without us thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you are probably closer to the process than an awful lot of people in terms of experience of it and how it all works because of the posts that you hold.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any opportunity, especially given that FCA is now talking about civil society involvement? Do you think there's a chance that we as vapers, as civil society, as I see it, can get involved with FCA to talk to them as part of their expert panel?
That's possible, actually, and I would engage with Deborah on that and see whether she thinks that's something that could happen in the future. I mean, my advice at the moment would be, the COP6 process is quite closed. I mean, I'm not there. The only academic from our UK centre that you mentioned earlier who's there is Jeff Collin. It'll be interesting to hear when he comes back what he thinks, but he's just an observer. So I would say at the moment, getting involved with the NGO, civil society bodies, wherever they are, and trying to engage with them at events, meeting, etc., to feed back into the FCA and the COP process. That's that's where we are at the moment. But whether the FCA will allow a better structure for public involvement, I think we'd all welcome that.
Certainly something I'll be following up. We live in interesting times with regard to all of this. I think it's safe to say I hadn't seen this position 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now in a position where, he said, leading almost seamlessly into Scotland, where we are being consulted.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this consultation progress. And it was you that brought it to my attention this morning, and thank you for that, and thank you for coming to talk to me about it. Again, what do you make of the consultation document as it's out there? Because it does seem to be framed to be coming rather from a more negative side than a more positive side.
So my position in this is that I sit on a couple of Scottish Government groups, and I work with the Scottish Government tobacco, alcohol and food policy team. So they're a small team, we're a small country. They've been working on this document, which I hadn't seen the text of before today. They were very careful not to involve me in it because they know my views. But I'm pleased that it's come out. And I think what I would say is that we've come a long way in the last year and a half since the NICE tobacco harm reduction guidance was published. And I think there is a recognition in Scotland, and you'll see in England through Public Health England as well, that we need to talk to people about electronic cigarettes, get their views, and that allowing the public an opportunity to contribute to how policy is developed, particularly in this area where people have such strong opinions, and their futures and their future health is at stake. So absolutely understandable that people feel strongly. For me, this is an important step. So I think there are a number of us who were very keen that the Scottish Government consult, and that's what they're doing. So the text may be a bit negative in parts, I think you're right, but I think they are kind of in a position where they feel they have to be ultra cautious for whatever reason.
Yeah, I get that. I do actually get that. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and when I read the part on purpose, it says, our aim is to continue to build on a robust statutory and policy framework which supports our public health policy objectives on tobacco control. These are to reduce the harm caused by tobacco through preventing the take-up of smoking, particularly amongst young people, protecting adults and children from exposure to second-hand smoke, and supporting those who do smoke to quit and not relapse back to smoking. And this is one of the areas that I have to say I find a little difficult, because I'm seeing a lot of the conversation at the moment being phrased around this whole notion of smoking cessation, which seems to imply as well nicotine cessation. And I see the two as being two very different things. And when I see e-cigs being dragged into this whole nicotine cessation thing, it starts to worry me. How do you see that playing out as part of this consultation?
Okay, well, I think there are a lot of countries, a number of countries in the world, who not only want to have a tobacco-free society, but they would like to have a nicotine-free society as well. So I mentioned Australia already. That is definitely the position of some colleagues in Australia. And Finland, as you probably know, Finland has set tobacco-free targets, but they've also said they want to be a nicotine-free society. Certainly the policymakers use that language. The UK is in a different position, though. If you look at how we're observed internationally, when I go to conferences or talk to other folk from other countries, they see us actually as not exactly peddling nicotine, but being much more positive about nicotine use. And that's because of the history we've had with medicinal nicotine, all the early research, and then also the harm reduction stuff we've done lately, the guidance I mentioned earlier. So even though we have in the UK clinicians, policymakers and academics who would like to see no nicotine use, I think most people, a lot of people in the field, are very able to separate tobacco smoking from nicotine use and don't view nicotine use, including potentially longer term nicotine use, as necessarily a bad thing. And you know who some of those folk are in positions of influence.
Yes, I do. best I say no more about that one.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, what is your view, your personal view about nicotine use? Because were you ever a smoker? Have you ever smoked?
I smoked very, very briefly as a teenager, and I never was a regular smoker, and I'm always very clear to say that. So my position is basically as chair of the NICE harm reduction guidance. We spent 2 years looking at all the evidence around nicotine use, and there are two bodies of evidence, Dave, that we looked at. We looked at nicotine replacement therapy, but we also looked at snus, because that was the only example we had of a society switching to another product that's not combustible tobacco. And in terms of nicotine, particularly nicotine replacement therapy, it was very clear to me from the evidence that people could use nicotine for smoking cessation, for temporary abstinence, and in the longer term, in the studies we looked at, up to 5 years, but possibly longer than that, perfectly safely. Now, there are some exceptions. Pregnant women is the key one. But in general, my view is if somebody wants to continue using nicotine, although most of the studies we have are around medicinal nicotine, then they should. It's their right, it's available, and I don't think there are significant health harms associated with that. So that's my position on that, basically.
Right. And thank you for that. I would agree with you, actually.
Well, I mean, I always use the example of my great uncle, who stopped smoking probably well over a decade ago now. He was a heavy smoker, and he still uses the nicotine gum every day. I mean, he's tried e-cigarettes, and he's not a user at the moment, despite conversations he's had with me and others. But he's still using the gum, and that's helpful to him. And good luck to him.
Yes, I mean, Jack Straw apparently has been using nicotine gum now for 8 years. And he's still doing all right. And there's loads of people at it. Do you subscribe to the John Britton theory that it's probably no worse than a decent espresso?
Well, I think John has a tendency to say that in groups where he knows it's just going to irritate people. So I think that there are limitations to the caffeine nicotine comparison, definitely. But I think that it's helpful for people to recognize that we have other addictive substances that we accept in society that people use regularly. And to draw those parallels where appropriate.
Do you know that's a beautiful way of putting it? That really is. Thank you for that. I'm kind of hoping that as the process goes on with all of the various different bits and bobs are happening, that we can have a regular conversation like this. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I would be. And what I would say in the short term, just to go back to the Scottish consultation, is one of the reasons why I wanted to come on and speak to you today is because I really feel very strongly that folk need to respond to this consultation as individuals, as well as groups. You'll see some interesting stuff in here, Dave. You maybe picked up on proxy purchase of e-cigarettes. There's stuff in the Scottish consultation on advertising and promotion, because the Scottish government would like to have its own powers on that. It doesn't at the moment, but that's part of the debate about more devolution you will have heard about. Because a lot of folk are not happy about the referendum. And then, of course, there's a question in here on use in enclosed public spaces. I've been very vocal about my position on that, which is I don't support restrictions on use in public spaces. I don't think we've got the evidence to support that. So there's really are things in here that people can get their teeth into. And from my perspective, it'd be absolutely brilliant if anybody who's a current e-cigarette user or a supporter could have their voice heard in this way. And if they're even better if they're based in Scotland. So if you've got any folk who are up here, they're the ones that we primarily need to hear from.
Well, yes. So there you are, folks. If you're up in Scotland particularly, sit down, think about it. The proxy purchasing one, I have my views on that.
Yeah.
And I may well do a thinking and driving piece on it, because I think proxy purchasing, a restriction or a ban on that would be a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Given that NRT is available to 12-year-olds, they can go and buy it for themselves.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of, we need to hear from people on that. It's a new area. So just so folk know, we have a proxy purchase ban for tobacco in Scotland that isn't in place in England. So if somebody buys cigarettes for a child, they can be prosecuted through proxy purchase. Mm-hmm. What I would say is that we haven't had any cases brought to the courts since that was introduced a couple of years ago. But some would argue that for cigarettes, it's an important principle. So yeah, let's hear from folk about what they think about extending that to e-cigarette. The other one that's in there, if we've got time, is we have a tobacco retailer register, which you don't have in England. or in Wales at the moment, although I think that might be on the cards in Wales, where basically anybody who sells tobacco has to register. They don't pay, they just have to be on a register. And the proposal here is that the register is extended to e-cigarettes. And the reason the Scottish Government is giving for that is because of the proposal of an age restriction that they need to enforce. But, you know, everybody's going to have different views, so let's hear views on that one too.
Yes, I think it's going to be quite an interesting analysis that gets done, and I would like to think that, unlike with EFVI, all 2.1 million current users of e-cigs would have a voice in this. It's certainly time they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But for the moment, Linda Bauld, thank you very, very much for talking to me. And as I say, I hope we can carry the conversation on further.
Thank you, Dave. It was great to speak to you. I hope to see you soon. Thanks.
And that was Dave Dawn. Ooh, echo. That was Dave Dawn talking to Linda Bauld. I would love to comment on that, but I have totally run out of time. So very quickly, I just want to say thanks very much to Dave for providing all that material for tonight. I'll be back again next week. Now I'm back in the saddle. It's going to get really easy again, isn't it? Thanks ever so much for tuning in. Sorry we're a bit late finishing. All the best. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Good night.